How's it going, guys? My name's Graham, welcome to Two Left Thumbs, and this is another installment of my Who Is comic book series. Maybe I should title this series, I don't know. Back a few months ago at the Disney Expo 2019, Marvel announced that they will eventually be developing Disney Plus shows for Ms. Marvel, She-Hulk, and Moon Knight. We have next to no details on any of these specifically. We know that they're going to be coming sometime after all those other ones they announced, like WandaVision and Loki and What If, all that stuff. I ran a quick poll on the channel basically saying, hey, out of these, which would you most like to see a Who Is video on? And Moon Knight won by quite a lot. I feel like all three of them are on the lesser known side. People have probably heard of She-Hulk, but don't really know much of the history. So I'd like to cover all of them eventually, specifically Moon Knight for now. I know certain people only care about certain things, so I'm going to have a few links in the corner here. You can use those as timestamps if, say, for example, you only care about his powers. For years now, people have been asking Marvel, when are you guys going to do Moon Knight? When are we going to see a TV show? When's he going to be like a Netflix MCU movie? When are we going to get a feature film? When? Moon Knight, when? He's always been very popular, and he's been one of the most requested characters I've ever seen people begging for on forums and stuff. They've actually attempted to make shows for him all the way back in 2006 and 2008, pre-MCU existence. There was actually a Blade TV show around that time, and in one episode they mentioned Marc Spector by name, but he's never on screen, he's not important. They were planning to roll him out and introduce him into the show, but the Blade was cancelled before that could happen. But we now know, it's been confirmed from the Feige himself, that we will be getting a Disney Plus Moon Knight show that is set within the MCU. Neither this or Ms. Marvel or She-Hulk, none of them have been dated, so they're unlikely to even be a part of this Phase 4 that they've announced. This is longer term stuff that they're building towards. Meaning, based on that current trajectory that they've mapped out, the absolute soonest we would see the show is 2022, and my guess is it's going to be a few years after that even. Things like showrunner, directors, casting announcements, we're so far off from that stuff, so I can't even begin to speculate, probably won't really touch on it. Instead, I can talk about things like who the character of Moon Knight is, maybe shed some light on why he's so interesting and popular with people, what specifically his powers and abilities are or have been, how the character has developed through the years, how he came to be in the comics and kind of the role he serves, important storylines for the character, and at the end I like to have a little bit of fun for myself and speculate on a way in which they could make a TV show around this character and potentially integrate that into the MCU. I'm quite obviously recording this separately, but it took me so long to get around to editing this video that some new information has come to light. Marvel has found their writer for the series in Jeremy Slater. He's assembling his own team of writers, but he was the head guy, known for his recent work on Netflix's The Umbrella Academy series. But much more excitingly and more importantly was when speaking to the role that these characters will have in the future of the MCU. We have characters like Falcon, Winter Soldier, Loki, Scarlet Witch all coming over to Disney Plus and then presumably going back to movies again. What about characters like Moon Knight, She-Hulk, and Ms. Marvel that are starting in Disney Plus? Feige just straight up confirmed, yeah, these characters are gonna end up in the movies. They're gonna move back and forth. We'll use them however we need them. Disney Plus is a substantially important integral part of the MCU moving forward. And so yeah, there's gonna be a lot of moving parts, and definitely expect to see these guys in movies in the future. So those wild ideas of seeing Moon Knight and Deadpool and Ghost Rider on screen together, totally a possibility, which is pretty awesome. Moon Knight's real name is Marc Spector. Very cool name. I like that a lot. And he's ranked on various different greatest comic book characters of all time lists. IGN's list specifically describes him as Batman with a multiple personality disorder, and yeah, that's pretty succinct. That pretty much sums it up. Some of the early background of the character. Spector was born in Chicago, the son of a Jewish-American rabbi. As he was growing up, he had a traumatic event in his childhood where a close family friend ended up being a secret serial killer. I guess most serial killers are secret. This is when Mark first stepped up and acted like a true superhero, but it also began to plant the seeds for his multiple personality disorder. Later on in life, as an adult, he became a heavyweight boxer before eventually joining the Marines. After his time there, he's continued to work on in that line of work as a mercenary. While working for an African mercenary, Raoul Bushman in Egypt, they stumble across this archaeological dig that's full of artifacts and treasures, relics and riches. Raoul then kills the archaeologists to loot the site himself. Spector, with a little bit more of a moral compass, is opposed to this and tries to fight and stop Bushman, but he's mortally wounded in the process and left to die. After Bushman's collected up his relics and taken off, the Egyptians who worship at the temple bring Mark's body to the statue of Khonshu, the Egyptian moon god. As Mark's heart begins to stop beating in front of the statue, he is visited by the spirit of Khonshu. In this vision, he is offered a second chance and told that he may serve on Earth as the avatar for Khonshu. Once he's revived, he uses these powers to defeat Bushman, and he returns to America to don the alter ego of Moon Knight aka the Fist of Khonshu. He made quite a bit of money as a mercenary, he was good at his job, and he wisely invests it, earning himself a small fortune. It's at this time that he creates multiple fake identities for himself. It serves him in his crime fighting, it allows him to shroud his true identity, he's able to more easily infiltrate certain things, and it also allows him to hide and distance himself from a quite violent past. For example, he is Stephen Grant, a millionaire entrepreneur, through whom he's able to make those investments and invest in a large estate. He can also be Jake Lockley, a taxi driver that he uses when he needs to be on the ground and interact with civilians. Keep an eye on the streets. While also serving specific purposes in Spector's crime fighting, he also uses these as a form of escapism, mentally distancing himself from his crimes as a mercenary. As Mark continues to fight those personal demons, Stephen Grant and Jake Lockley begin to take deeper hold. They stop becoming so much of an invented personality and a disguise, and they manifest as something more dissociative and become their own separate identities. He no longer switches to these alter egos and disguises, his mind now moves from believing he's one and then the other. He originally had a slightly different origin than this. It was a little bit more convoluted. It's something that they eventually retconned and they played it off as like, oh, that wasn't actually that character that you thought that it was, and they weren't working under the motivations that you originally thought that they were. They just thought of a more interesting direction for the characters. That's the only one I'm talking about. The only thing I'll mention about that is that it did involve his frequent sidekick, Jean-Paul Duchamp, aka Frenchie. I won't get too in-depth on him. Maybe he'll have a role in the show, but maybe the fact that The Boys just came out and has a main character called Frenchie, they might step away from that. So, troubled childhood, boxer, marine, mercenary, Fist of Khonshu. Now we can talk a little bit about his specific powers and abilities, and here is where more of those Batman comparisons are going to be more apparent. They're both wealthy humans who supplement themselves with high-tech gadgets. He's also an expert detective who's very proficient in armed combat and martial arts. A key difference here is that his strength, endurance, and agility are actually tied to the lunar cycles. He's at his absolute strongest at a full moon, but at a new moon, he can still lift like hundreds of pounds. He's strong no matter what, but it ramps up with the moon. It seems like that this specific aspect of his powers has come and gone. Maybe it's less important to his character than it was at its origin, but it's kind of cool. You could play around with that in interesting ways. A cool little spin on the typical nighttime vigilante fighter that I like here is he takes the absolute opposite approach of Batman, wearing all white because he wants his enemies to see him coming. Here's a quote from that. "I don't wear white to hide myself. I wear it so they'll see me coming, so they know who it is. Because when they see white, it doesn't matter how good a target I am. Their hands shake so bad, they couldn't hit the moon." So he's still using that like fear approach, but he's maximizing it. He's like, I don't even care if you know that I'm here. I'm kicking your ass anyways. My apologies that I have to read this list because I don't trust myself to memorize it and I'm going to mispronounce half of it. He's an expert in Kung Fu, Eskrima, Judo, Karate, Ninjutsu, Savate, and Muay Thai. Could you tell I said some of those words more quickly because I didn't trust my ability to say them? His fighting style is still largely rooted in his origins of being a boxer. He's kind of a dirty fighter. He doesn't care very much about finesse, and he just cares about getting the job done. Another character who will be in the Black Widow movie that I'll be interested in doing a video on when that's a little bit closer is Taskmaster. His whole deal is that he's able to perfectly replicate anyone's fighting styles, and he has specifically said he will not replicate Moon Knight's style. He's such a bruiser and a brawler and a little bit of a maniac, he'd much rather take a punch than dodge it or block it, and so Taskmaster is like, I don't want to mimic that, I don't want to get punched, but Moon Knight just kind of goes berserker mode and just gets hit and keeps going. He excels with a lot of weapons, a lot of hand-to-hand stuff, but he especially is good with throwing knives. In some of the more recent runs of the character, the whole ties to the lunar cycle has been cut. They explain it away by saying that Khonshu is essentially punishing Mark for being disobedient. He's not really like being an avatar and representing him in a good light. He's going out there and doing his own thing, and Khonshu's like, hey, come on, man, that's not what I brought you back for. Less of an ability and kind of a cool consequence, I guess you would say, of Mark's position. Psychic characters and mutants and things like that that are capable of tracking down individuals, that whole spectrum of heroes and villains, they claim to have specific trouble tracking and reading Mark due to his multiple personalities. His mind and thoughts are just kind of a mess. There have been explanations that it's not so much that he's just psychotic or a lunatic, and that some of this might be a result of what Khonshu did to him. Khonshu, the moon god themselves, actually has 4 aspects. There are Pathfinder, Embracer, Defender, and Watcher, with Mark's mind creating and cycling through the multiple personalities as a way to cope with that multi-dimensional godly perspective. I kind of like that description because he's still kind of a nut job to an extent, but it's more that this change has so profoundly affected him that, like, if this god is going to use him as an avatar, the human brain can't appreciate that scope, and so these different personalities spun out to account for that. So there's kind of conflicting things going on there. Some things say it's the result of the god, some say it's this childhood trauma, some just say it's something that he always had in his brain. The multiple personalities are always an aspect of Marc Spector, but the explanation kind of varies. Now, an interesting thing, which I always love when you have an unreliable narrator like this, is someone who has, in a way, a mental illness. They're struggling with something here. It changes their perspective and their story so frequently. There are theories as to whether or not he was ever blessed by the moon god Khonshu, or if that is just an excuse he made to run around beating the hell out of people. It might actually just be another manifestation and another layer to his psychosis. People have trouble reading his mind, so even characters with telepathy can't answer that question. It adds like a cool layer of mystery to the character. This actually goes so far that it's unclear if he has any level of mystical strength, and it's just that his belief in that idea goes so far that it taps into, like, you know, that adrenaline strength that people get, and it actually super pumps him up just through, like, pure force of will. This level of disassociation that he has with his body and his mind and his multiple personalities and things, it also kind of leaves him largely impervious to pain. That's part of why when he goes in fighting, he just takes punches. That threshold of pain is so high that he consistently will just, like, walk off getting shot in the leg. That's part of why people are so damn scared of him. When this guy shows up all in white and you know that a bullet's not going to slow him down, you probably think twice about how that fight is actually going to go down. Now, his original costume was just made of Kevlar, but eventually he has it remade, woven with adamantium, which is the same thing that we have in Wolverine's claws. And through tech improvements, he can suit up remotely the way Iron Man eventually does. Now let's talk about some of the developmental origins of the character, the people who played a role in establishing him, introducing him to the comics, and shaping him into who we know now. Moon Knight debuted in 1975 in Werewolf by Night number 32, written by Doug Moench, with art by Don Perlin. I'm not sure if it's Moench or Moench. It's not a familiar name for me. I'll try my best. Doug actually has a rather notable run back for 8 years on Master of Kung Fu, which is Shang-Chi, who is now getting a movie and is someone I've previously done one of these videos on, so you guys might follow up with that after this. Anyway, I guess I can talk a little bit here about his original origins. Moon Knight was written as a villain hired by the Committee to take down the werewolf, but he decides to help him escape instead, fighting alongside one another. In 1976, Moon Knight was granted 2 issues in Marvel's Spotlight, basically a series used to test pilot new characters. In a funny coincidence here, the editors who originally took a liking in the character and wanted to see him tested further were Len Wein and Marv Wolfman. There was then the retconning that he was never a villain and that it was all a cover that he was working for the Committee. He was just trying to infiltrate the organization, those same rewrite tropes. Moon Knight ran briefly as a backup strip to Hulk magazine, drawn by Bill Sienkiewicz. He was being drawn in a very Neil Adams-influenced style that did nothing really to help disassociate the character from those Batman clone comparisons. Moon Knight's first ongoing series came in 1980, with Doug Moench back as the writer, and Bill Sienkiewicz continuing on as the artist. This took care of the character's backstory and origins in a way that was only touched on previously, and established that arch nemesis, Bushman. 1985's 6-issue miniseries Moon Knight Fist of Khonshu introduced the idea of Moon Knight suffering from schizophrenia due to the stresses of his multiple aliases. The characters had a recurring presence over the decades, but the last time Doug Moench wrote for him was back in 1999's 4-part series High Strangeness, which was nominated for the Comic Buyer's Guide Fan Award for Favorite Limited Series. I'm sure if you were to Google Moon Knight and look at all the different cool badass images of him, you're gonna come across a few that look like this. 2014 was the first time we saw Moon Knight in his suit and tie look. It's kind of an alternate take on the character that coexists with Moon Knight. He goes by Mr. Knight, with the distinction being that Moon Knight is a personality used to dispose of more supernatural threats, and Mr. Knight works more closely with the police, dealing with more street-level crime and thugs. I'm not a huge fan, I just kind of like Moon Knight being Moon Knight. They leaned in quite hard with the mental disorder stuff, with 2016 having Mark waking up in a mental institution, being told that his life as Moon Knight has been a massive hallucination, a product of his psychosis. But it's kind of more of that, like, well, is it? Is this just another way he's being messed with? Is this his own mind cooking up things? It's more of that unreliable narrator stuff that's really fun. Total random side note, the most recent run ended just under a year ago, and it was written by Max Bemis. I have no idea if that name will mean anything to people out there. It caught my eye, and I thought, like, no, it couldn't be. I only really know Max Bemis for his music. My buddy Andy got me really into Say Anything back when we were in, like, high school. Didn't realize he occasionally wrote comics. How about some important storylines for Moon Knight? Very few of us have time to sit down and actually read everything. Let's just pick out a few key moments that kind of help provide a nice overview of the character and some of what he's been through. That Senkowitz and Month run that I mentioned before really laid the foundations for the character that we see today. In the 80s, there wasn't so much of this, but this was quite dark and gritty, granting Marvel an off-shade corner of their world. Maybe they could start folding in other characters that have kind of that darker side to them, Punisher, Ghost Rider, things like that. Well, the Avengers are all off in bright colors, rah, happy, everyone's a family and joy. These guys can go deal with like the sick, dark stuff that's happening, hidden away. That same run started to give us some cool supernatural elements, which makes sense when he's introduced in that Wolfman storyline. One of the villains that fits into the supernatural category is this guy Morpheus. His powers come as the result of this viral infection from failed drug testing. He becomes this hideous, disfigured monster who can project nightmares. It's kind of like Freddy Krueger meets Mysterio. You know what people are afraid of, and then you like make them live it. Mark has this off-again, on-again partner, Marlene. Their relationship is strained, to say the least. Moon Knight acts as an avatar, but there were times in the earlier comics where now and again Khonshu would kind of fuse with Mark and inhabit his body physically. This would enhance and create this combined might and play off of those lunar abilities. Every time Mark dies, Khonshu can bring him back. But their motives often differ. Mark's a little bit of a rebel there, so Khonshu kind of abandons Mark eventually. At one point, Moon Knight gets this teenage sidekick, Jeff Wilde. Because why not give the character known as being a Batman clone a teenage sidekick? This is also around the same time that Mark first meets Black Cat. Come on, guys. Wilde goes by Midnight. Super cool teenage name for sure. But he dies repeatedly and comes back as a cyborg. But Mark is eventually forced to kill him when he goes kind of off the rails on a cyborg murder spree, letting his soul finally rest. The arc Vengeance of Moon Knight really underscores the character at his most violent. It really specifically pulls from his mercenary background in a way that previous comics had not. He's trying to be a hero, but he's also fighting against years of muscle memory that tend to cause him to take things too far. It's this whole other layer and aspect of the character of being kind of damaged goods, but he's still trying to do his best despite it all. It's very interesting, and I want that to be a more prominent part of the character. Through this run, we start to see that intimidation factor and the violence of Moon Knight dialed way up. At this point, Batman, he is not. This isn't really a recurrently explored arc, but I think it's something that could be interesting. Our introduction to Randall Spector, Mark's brother. The two actually joined the military together, where eventually Randall kills Mark's girlfriend. Upon learning this, Mark retaliates violently and believes that he has killed Randall. The storylines that follow that have been largely retconned kind of repeatedly and become less important. But what instead is important is that Randall eventually becomes a member of the cult of Khonshu, himself acting as the avatar for Princess Nephthysm, goddess of night, becoming Shadow Knight. Not to be confused with another rogue of his, Black Spector. I know those names are quite different, but they're kind of like thematically the same, and I find it easy to get them bundled up sometimes. And while Black Spector is actually powerless and could be interesting to explore sometime as well, I think that brotherhood and superpowered matchup with Randall, Shadow Knight to be clear, would make him a much more interesting opponent for Moon Knight. They don't have to have the same powers. We know that that's like a common trap with superhero movies, is that you just give them a nemesis who is the same but opposite. But the idea of both of them being souped up with god powers is pretty cool. Now, a little bit of my own self-indulgent, like what could they do with the character? What kind of stuff could you put into the MCU? It's important to note what a big-time lone wolf Moon Knight is. He is teamed up with the Secret Avengers and West Coast Avengers, but neither really lasted long. He's usually seen as erratic, violent, volatile, and quite often crazy. He's a difficult guy to work with, and he's pretty well fine with that. So I wouldn't expect his introduction in Disney Plus to build up to some sort of new Avengers or Defenders style team-up. I'm sure somewhere down the line we'll see him briefly interact with someone here or there. I think it would be fun to see him play off some of the more straight-laced heroes, putting him in a room with like Sweetheart Spider-Man, or good, just, morally strong Captain America, something like that. They could be interesting, there could be like a fun opposition there. But more than likely we'll see him eventually team up with the likes of Punisher, Ghost Rider, or maybe even at this point Deadpool. And at this point Marvel has said they will continue to make Deadpool with that creative team, and they'll allow it to still be an R-rated franchise. So if they eventually make a Moon Knight TV show and Deadpool 3, 4, what have you, and have Moon Knight show up in there, oh, that could be good. That's long-term stuff. Instead, Season 1 should be solo. Don't worry about other characters. You guys have decades to worry about that stuff. Now, throughout the comics, the characters' origins have been established, but it's less well known than with characters like Peter Parker or Steve Rogers or even Stephen Strange. I think we could spend an episode or several episodes actually exploring those origins. They can expand beyond what the comics as much as they see fit. I mean, even in a TV show like Daredevil, he's pretty much Daredevil right away. He just doesn't have the name and costume overly quickly. I think they can do something similar here. He can spend some time growing into his own, taking on street-level threats and things like that. Maybe he gets his costume a little more quickly. But the actual stuff where maybe you quickly learn that he used to be a Marine and then a mercenary, and then he gets revived by Khonshu and gains his powers or whatever, get that out of the way fairly quickly. If there were to be another hero in Season 1, I would only want like a cameo, and I would want it to be along the lines of Mark is trying to be a superhero, but he's taking things too far. He's being a psycho, like kind of like when Punisher was going off the walls. Daredevil stepped in and was just like, yo, this can't be the way that you do things. Maybe you could have some sort of cool, like, intersection where Sam Wilson's Captain America shows up and is, like, trying to stop him, thinking he's a villain, realizing that this guy is actually doing good, but maybe going about it the wrong way. Maybe Sam learns a little something about you have to fight dirty sometimes. He'll only just be coming to his own through Captain America and the Winter Soldier, or Falcon and the Winter Soldier, whatever they're calling that. So, like, sprinkling him into another show and having him learn a lesson could be cool. Early episodes could be Spector just wailing on random baddies, maybe building up to a bigger threat the way Kingpin was sitting above everyone else. I don't know if we necessarily need Bushman immediately, seeing as he's usually the big nemesis of Moon Knight. Maybe you want to save him, but it would probably be more interesting to treat him like they did with Kingpin, where he exists right away. He can be tied to Mark's origins, which makes it more interesting. Don't kill him in the first season. Have him be like Season 1 and then 3, and then like in a movie or something. Just don't kill him right away. That's just, I hate when they do that too abruptly. But I think maybe a more interesting route than that, especially when it's basically already been done with Daredevil and probably other shows a dozen times already, would be more, the focus is on him trying to learn to become a hero, dealing with really street-level threats, but the majority of the plot is dedicated to his struggles with his, like, mental health and mental illness. The slipping sanity throughout can be a growing thing, and the spinning out of his multiple personalities, and the fact that he's an unreliable narrator. Now and again, maybe we have time skips or shifts in perspectives, and, like, questioning what has and hasn't happened. There can be, like, a mystery element to the show, but the mystery is the show you're watching more so than, like, something within the show, if that makes sense. He's kind of a detective too, so there could be a bit of that. He could be trying to solve mysteries while you're simultaneously trying to be like, is any of this happening? What is going on? When you're just making so many shows, and in a casual event you announce 3 new TV shows after a couple months before announcing an entire Phase 4 lineup of movies and TV shows, Marvel really has to start thinking of ways that they can make more unique storylines and make this stand out from other things that they've done. Really playing up that side of the character, exploring that more deeply, asking tough questions, showing the violent side of the character. Those are the more interesting parts. He's badass, he looks cool, but the core appeal of the character and what makes him unique is the fact that he's dealing with this whole other thing. That's not really an outline of a story. In other videos like this, I've kind of mapped out my ideal story. I don't know. I don't know what I would want to see, but I know what I want the focus to be. That's all I have for you guys on Marc Spector, Moon Knight, for today. I would love to hear from you guys in the comments about like what your favorite aspects of the characters are, what your favorite runs or standout comics are. I probably breezed over things. I try to pick and choose things very specifically to share in these sorts of videos. Things that I think are interesting to the character, but that I think are likely to come up in the MCU at some point. So hopefully that helps give you a nice map of things. At this point, I've created a very long list of comic book characters and similar such things. Really high up on the list would be things like Taskmaster, Red Guardian. Those are 2 characters that are going to be in Black Widow. We also know that Birds of Prey is coming out soon. Bloodshot, which is neither Marvel or DC, but that's coming around the corner. We'll have Wonder Woman 1984, so maybe I could talk about Cheetah, something like that. The list is very large. Basically, every new movie and TV show that comes out, I look at the list and try and find characters that I think are probably not very familiar to the public consciousness. Based on the fact that I think I know quite a bit about comics, and it's usually based on things that stand out as being something I don't recognize as well, then I can go do a deep dive, research it, distill that down, and share it back with you guys. I hope you enjoy this style of video. It's pretty fun for me. It's an excuse for me to do like a Wikipedia crawl and read some old comics and things that I probably would have done anyways. Let me know if you have suggestions for future videos, either on characters or content that you would rather see explored in this style of video, something that I may have overlooked that would really elevate these. I don't know. I'd like to hear from you. Don't forget to check the end cards. I'll have links to other videos like this, just like a playlist of this style of video, and you can click around for other characters that you think are interesting and you want to learn more about. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you again soon.